Welcome to live stream number 140. Today is April 3rd, Tuesday, 2018. And today's topic is model O-ring grooves in a box with dividers. And that might not be the best title I ever come up with. Here is somewhat similar to what we're gonna try to to model up today. All right, so this is one of those live streams that I hope this stuff is useful somehow. I got some different requests. One of them was, how do you model O-rings? So we're definitely gonna cover that. It kind of like turned into, how do you create dividers and boxes, some small nifty tips and tricks as you're modeling inside of Fusion 360. And I thought, you know what, why don't we do this? We'll model this something similar to this thing today. And then we will continue tomorrow and we will add a lid to this box here. And then we can, because some people have also asked about how do you create like a locking mechanism for like, a plastic box. You're kind of like snapping it together, some hinges, some things. And I'm just going to kind of like, model something up and then hopefully, you can pick up some tips and tricks between it. Try to keep it not too boring. How about that? All right, let's jump into it. Good to see all of you guys. So let's just get rid of this part here. Now let's start out with one little important notice here, and that is, so today we're gonna model up kind of like the bottom of the box, and then tomorrow we're gonna model up the lid. That would make some people say, "Ooh, rule number one on the forum." And some people are now like, what the heck is rule number one? Rule number one is that if you know that you're going to make what we would call an assembly inside of Fusion 360, multiple components, then rule number one is to actually create those components before you create anything else. Now, you guys know me. I have a tendency to kind of like crisscross over and do different things because I don't think it's so important, but I'll argue with those people later. But let's do rule number one. We're going to right click and say we're going to create a new component up here. And that will give us that we have like this assembly icon up here. So we're going to have one component. One's going to be the bottom. And then we're going to right click. We're going to create that other component that is going to be the lid. Now you can choose which one you want to work in. There's nothing in these two here. So I might just choose to slowly left click here and call this the box. And then we could slowly left click here and call that the lid. And the only reason I picked those two was because the box is always on the bottom. So that's little rule number one from the forum. If you know you're going to make an assembly, you know there's going to be multiple components in it, then go ahead and create the components first by right clicking up here. That way you'll make sure that all your features are in the right place if you ever want to break it up later. So I'm going to make sure the little fisheye is active on the box because that's the one we're going to model up on here today. So let's start creating this type of box here. And I'm kind of like jumping in and out. I'm going to do some tips and tricks as I'm going along. I know for myself, this was one of the best ways that I have learned using CAD was to actually watch somebody else start modeling up and explaining their thought process they were modeling up. So that's what I hope that this will give you a little bit of value. I'm going to start out with a sketch, and let's sketch on the top face here. Now, many times you will see me use the S key in here. So hit S on your keyboard, and we get this little menu here. But I think it's a long time since I've actually talked about this S key. So I'm just hitting the S on my keyboard, and the S key is pretty neat. You can search for different functions in here, as you will see in a second. You can also add things in here, and you can subtract things. So if you want to get rid of something, you just left drag it off, and now it's actually gone. And then you can find it again. This was the center rectangle. So start typing in and center rectangle. If I want to add it back again, I can just go up and click on the little arrow there, add to toolbox, and now it's in here. So if I want to do a center rectangle, instead of going up here and dig into the menus, right there, I could just hit S and snap into that, snap into the origin, and let's make this one 100 by 120 millimeters. We're gonna make a small little comfortable box here. Hit enter and we get it fully enclosed. Q, press pull, and let's give this some thickness. Let's make it 25 millimeters on it here. Now that S key is aware of where we are in. So before we were in a sketch environment, we got the center rectangle, but if I hit the S key again, then you will now see that it actually is now jumped over to feature, so you can add different things in here. Now here you will see the fillet is, so I can click on the fillet tool, and I can add a outside fillet through here. So like these 4 here, and let's make let's make them 12. That's probably fine. We could also add a fillet to the bottom. Again, you could hit the S key, and there you'll see again it's sitting right there. Select the bottom here, and let's make that 2. Now this is not much of a box right now, but I decided to add those fillets now because I want to use the shell command. Now the shell command modify shell, but of course also S key. You could type in shell here, and you can see it's right here, and then you could actually add it to that menu. Now it will always be up here. So I'm going to select this face here, and then I can start adding some universal thickness to this one here, right? Now I want to add an O-ring going around, because this is where this whole thing started. Somebody asking me, how the heck do you add an O-ring around here? So I'm actually going to make this thickness 8 millimeters. So now I've just added that thickness. Now the reason that I added the fillets before, see, everything is down in this timeline. The reason I added the fillets before I did the shell was because now you can see I got kind of like an inside radius in here. Now, if you right now go into, go up here to inspect and go into section analysis and snap on one of these faces, we can now see that because we added that shell command, we now have a unified 8 millimeters all the way around. Again, because everything in this line down here is history based, you can actually kind of break away from and do new things to this. So if I decided that, well, I only really want the walls to be 8 millimeters thick, I actually want the bottom to be thin, you could go in and hit Q again, and now it would actually be an offset face. Now you will see that in my instance here, it's only the bottom it's moving, but that's because I switched it around over here. Be aware of these menus over here. It normally would be on automatic, and then you will actually see on automatic that it also affects the side walls. So be aware of, you over here can say a new offset, and now it's just doing the bottom. So now I could go -5, and if I turn that section analysis back on, you will now see that the bottom is only 3 millimeters. The rest of it is 8. So I hope that this kind of like helps you kind of like think about how to work with some of this. Now we gotta add an O-ring going around the outside here, and then I thought, well, that's pretty plain, and tomorrow we're gonna add a lid with a snap-on, and maybe sometimes there's kind of like an indent in one of these. So why don't we create that? And I think you might have a tendency to look at what you have on the screen and think about, how do I go from here? And I don't know if this is a good advice or not, but remember what you have already happened in here. You don't have to, it doesn't have to happen from where you are right now. If I go back into the sketch here, edit the sketch, now I'm back to the first sketch we did, right? If I go in here, for example, and let's hit alpha line and sketch a line from this midpoint to this midpoint, and let's sketch kind of like an indent that goes something like maybe like this. D for dimension. Let's make this, I don't know, 3 maybe? That might not be enough. 20, I don't really know. I'm just making this up. So 1, 2 lines dimension. Then we could go up here and do a mirror. Boom, boom. Mirror over this line. This just saved me from drawing sketch mirror. Saved me from drawing the whole thing over. Now when I hit stop sketch, nothing changed. And you're like, well, why didn't anything change? Well, nothing changed because this extrusion still is looking at the original, the first extrusion is still looking at the original text. If we edit that, you will see that it actually noticed that there is 2 more profiles created in here. If we select this in here and hit OK, then you will see that we get a nice indent here where maybe our clip will kind of like fit in there like a thumb kind of thing in there. Now be aware of one thing here though. Look what happened down at the bottom. Because it changed things, the fillet didn't follow along. So you want to kind of keep an eye out for those kind of things because it lost some new edges created, and those edges was not in the original selection of these. Of course, you can just go in and select them again, and then it give them some kind of a radius, and then you will see that now it is how you maybe want it. Also notice we don't have any fillets on these areas here, so we could actually what I would do here is I would probably move my history line back, and then we could hit S key again to get that fillet tool, and we could add a couple of fillets to these here. I don't know, maybe 8. Looks pretty good. And then move forward, and then we kind of like got a nice fillet on that area there. Never mind. So now the reason I did that was because like now my fillets are kind of like bunched together in here. It's kind of like nice if your timeline is getting really long. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of get all that together. Actually, if your timeline gets really long, one of the tricks is you can actually, let's select these fillets here, these 3 fillets, right click, you can actually create a group right in here. So now you have a group. We can expand the group, we get the fillets, we can minimize it, makes it a little bit shorter, makes it rename it. That's maybe a little tip there. I don't know. Another thing I had on that model that you saw before we get to the O-ring grooves, is many times, if you're doing plastic parts at least, and I'm not a plastic part designer by any means, you will see that that I made this wall 8 millimeters thick. And that is great for where the O-ring's gonna be, but maybe you don't want it to be, all the way around. You could go in and use a revolve. Well, not the revolve, the sweep. But before I do the sweep for that, let's just do the O-ring groove, because that's kind of like in the title, and now I'm almost 15 minutes into this thing. So let's talk about an O-ring groove. A couple of people have asked me about doing O-ring grooves in something like this. So I have done O-ring grooves in the past a lot when I did like plastic injection molds, but I want to make sure that people understand that O-rings can be kind of tricky depending on what you are. Depending on what you're doing with O-rings, because some of them, especially if you like working with plastic injection molds, there can be like heat in there, heat zones, hot zones, and different things with that. And when I did O-ring grooves back in the day, it was definitely machine shop style O-rings. We had a couple of thumb rules. I'll share those with you in a second. One place, because there's some people in here who knows a lot more about O-rings than I do. One place is the machinery handbook in here. There's a section about O-rings if you want to be specific. Also, if you go to O-ring manufacturers, they will also many times show you specifically what the sizes should be. So I wanted to make sure I make that clear, because I don't want anybody to come to me and say, you know, your O-ring dimensions was not real. So let's put an O-ring into this. So I'm going to run an O-ring around this top face here. We're going to put in a 2mm O-ring. I'm going to show you a neat little trick with that too. So I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to create right in that plane that cuts right through here. And then somebody was asking me on a live stream the other day, what does slice do over here in the sketch palette? And I was like, I don't really know. I'm going to use it. So then you got to try to click on it. Look at this. It actually does a section view right where that sketch plane is. So now you can actually see where you're going to sketch. Isn't that nice? I don't know how long I've been using Fusion, and I haven't used that. So that's the slice sitting right over here. So you don't have to, you know, normally you'll be sketching in the middle, because we're sketching right in the center of the box here. You can see that on the plane. Why not turn the slice option on? That looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so let's sketch an O-ring groove. Now, I'm going to do this on purpose, and I do this a lot, especially if you're fairly new to Fusion. If you try to sketch in where there's other geometry, you have a tendency to snap to things you don't want, and that can be a little annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a 2-point rectangle. I'm just going to sketch out in space out here. Now, the first dimension I get is the depth of my O-ring. So this is going to be for a 2mm O-ring. So there's going to be a little bit of pressure on the O-ring on the top, normally about 20%. So we're going to make this one for a 2mm O-ring. I'm going to make this one 1.6. Now, don't sue me. This is just a good rule of thumb kind of thing, depending on what you're going to use these O-rings for. The second is the width of it, and then you would normally make the width a little bit longer, so when the O-ring is compressed from the top, that it has to go somewhere. So this is 2mm, so I'm going to make it 3. I looked up some different websites, and they would say that is a lot. That is kind of like my rule of thumb right there. Now, this rectangle here is kind of like floating around in space, but we got kind of like things narrowed down a little bit. I'm going to hit P for project, and I'm just going to project that edge right there on the top, because I'm going to use that with the collinear constraint and say, make this one and this line collinear. Right now, I kind of like added a relationship there, and now this thing cannot move up and down, but it can move kind of like along. And it can be, you see how, as I'm moving over here, how you will see that there's going to be some triangles and things popping up. And that's because it's trying to snap into place. You can hold down Control while you're moving it, and then it will not use that. Now, I'm just going to move it all the way over here, and then I'm actually going to place a dimension from this inner edge here, from this edge to this point right there. And I'm going to make that 2.5, because my math tells me that will place that rectangle in the center. I hope this was useful if you are fairly new to Fusion, to kind of like see how I many times will draw things up if it's going to be interfering with other things. All right, I'm going to stop sketch, and now you can see that kind of like that sketch is sitting in there. We're going to use the sweep for this. So the sweep needs, well, it needs two things. It needs a profile and a path. And if you ever watched any live streams from me in the past talking about the sweep, I might have said it needs 2 sketches. It's actually not true. Then I apologize that I lied to you. But it needs 2 things. It needs a profile, and that's the one we drew up there. Now, if you ever have a hard time picking the profile, like it's kind of hard to select it through here, just hold down your left mouse button for a few seconds, and this little dialog will come up, and then you can see the profile will show up right there, so you can select that. And then we can select the path. Now, the path is actually just an edge that it can follow along. So if I select one of these edges, I can select this one in here and it stops, but this one out here will actually, seems like we'll select the whole dang thing. That's a little bit easier. Now you will see that it selects the whole outside as a cut, and then we have that O-ring groove put in there for the 2mm in there. Excuse me. Still fighting this cold. So I think this looks I think this looks pretty dandy so far for a little bit of a box. Now, like I said before, many times when you're seeing this type of boxes, they're actually not keeping the outside wall 8 millimeters all the way around. They're really only doing it where the O-ring needs to be. So you could go in and start another sketch on this face here, and you might just create like a 2-point rectangle that could be, see, now I have this radius kind of like in my way for this intersection. Or we could do something like, I don't know, let's make that 20 tab 5. That will give us, I think, the same thickness as we had on our other one there. And we could go in and we could attach this, so this to this edge, and grab a corner. We can see here it can move up and down, so we could do another collinear from here to this edge, and then it's locked into space. Now I drew that on the back side here, and then we could go in and use the same function we just did and cut with. So if we go back into the sweep command, and again select a profile, that's going to be that profile there. Now again, you see how that face is in the way? Hold down, you can select that profile there, and then we could select the path for this, and I can select the whole outside. Actually, I think I'm probably just going to select the inside here, so I get it to right about where that thumb thing is. Let's hit OK to that, and you will see how that happens. Now, you see how our radius in the bottom got cut. And I did this kind of like a little bit on purpose to show you that you know, everything down in the history here will go in the order of us creating things. Now, you can actually move things down here in the history tree to different places. So if we go in here to this group, and now I can right click and I can I delete the group? Is that deleting the group, or is that deleting the fillets? Oh, look at that. Delete group and expand its content. Delete both group and its content. Oh, I didn't even know this. Group delete. Let's delete the group here. All right, so we have some fillets there. We have the fillets that goes around there. I don't know if I can move it. I can't move it behind it because it actually used that fillet as a reference for that line there. What I could have done was, what I should have done maybe, take that fillet and delete that. Okay, and if I delete that fillet, notice what happened here. This is one of the wonderful things. Why I love doing these in live streams. I deleted that fillet, and look what happens. Somebody right now is clamping their hands. This always happens to me. So what happened was I deleted this fillet down at the bottom in a fast movement, and now suddenly these are yellow because they lost their references. So what I'm talking about is that when I created that cutout here, I projected that bottom edge to make these two collinear with that. Well, that bottom edge was coming from because of where that fillet ended. So now where I deleted that fillet, I kind of screwed myself up a little bit. Now I'm going to do a Control-Z to undo that, and you should really do that as a habit. Whenever you see those yellow ones, you know, don't just move on. Stop right there and say, how can I fix that? So one of the ways to fix this would actually be to say, all right, you know what? Adding this cutout right here, that might not be the smartest thing. Now this groove here, was that the one that was alarming out when I deleted it before? Let's delete it. See, it says here the features referenced by other thing in the timeline. So if I delete this one, then it actually will also, again, mess up this reference on the outside. Now what the yellow means is that it just lost a reference. So I can actually edit the feature here, and I can probably find out, what happened was that it lost that reference on the outside on the profile. So if I reselect that again and close this up here like that, then that feature is actually perfectly fine. So that's one thing to know, that you can go in and if you ever see them yellow, it's because it lost a reference, and many times you just have to go in and select something again. Now, so what I wanted to do with this fillet on the bottom, I actually wanted the fillet to happen after I have done the bottom cut. So let's do that cut again, right? We can just go in and now we don't have anything down here in the bottom. So now we could actually just probably sketch something up here. We made it 5, we made it 20, like that there, right? And let's go in and do a sweep. Hold down so we can get the profile, select the path, and again we can select the outside or the inside. We'll select the outside here. We get the cut there, right? And now I can add the fillets. Now the fillet's not going to be all sectioned together because of the way I kind of like did this. But that was just to show you that you could actually put them together. So I'm just going to select these different edges here, and the fillet we added in there was a 2 millimeter there, and we can do that. And then I might also want to do a fillet on these edges here. I think I like to keep that front face thick because tomorrow we're going to put the lock on for the lip. But now we have kind of like created this lip here, and you'll probably also put a fillet underneath here because this will never be sharp for strengthening too. I hope you get the idea from this. The last thing I wanted to show before I end this, and I hope that this kind of like helps you kind of like some tips and tricks and see kind of like how working through some of this stuff, was how I did the ribs in the center here. So I'm going to open another sketch on this bottom of this part here. I'm actually going to do another rectangle. So I'm going to hit S key to hit that center rectangle we put on there. And I'm going to draw a rectangle out here. Now, I don't really care about the length, and I'm only going to care about the width. I'm going to make it 40, like this. And then I'm actually going to draw a line from the midpoint here to the midpoint there. And I'm going to do something really bad. I'm going to delete these two edge lines. So now I have kind of like, what is this, like a metal beam? Kind of like a railroad track kind of beam here. But it's underdefined. Notice that. I haven't put any dimensions on everything of it. But here's the neat trick about that. And that is there is a web function inside of Fusion here. So I can go in here and can select these different edges here, these 3 edges. I'm holding down Control to select them all. And if you give them a thickness, then you get the web here. Now there is actually also there's an up to next, and then there's a depth on these. So you can actually also control, like many times they will not go all the way up to the edge. They will actually subsize a little bit under, like maybe 20. And then you get kind of like that division in there for the box there. So the last thing I did with the mod you saw earlier, as I normally like to do, is just throw a little bit of appearance on it, just to make it look a little bit more pleasing on my eye. Many times I actually do that before I get to this far into the project. I hope this was helpful. Kind of like give you an idea about, depending on where you are in your Fusion learning experience. If you're brand new, if you came in a little bit late, notice that we're going to continue on this part tomorrow, where we're actually going to add some hinges on the back on this part, and then we're going to add a lid on with a latch that's going to go in and kind of like a snap latch. Like this is like one of those dividers you have your screws in, or something, maybe your fishing gear. I don't know. But this hopefully answered a couple of questions in regards to the O-rings, the web in there, and just some small like thought processes modeling things through here. And don't forget, if I went way too fast, you can always rewind. There's going to be, as soon as we end the live stream here, it's going to be up on the YouTube in 30 minutes or so, and you can re-watch it and drag the cursor back and watch it again. If you like this stuff, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up. If you don't, be honest, hit the thumbs down. I need this kind of feedback. I really appreciate it. If you have any future topics, anything you need, you would like to see in these live streams, my email address, lars.christensen@autodesk.com, is down in the description area. I really appreciate all you guys taking the time to watch these, just trying to add a little bit more value to your Fusion experience. If you're watching the recording, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you're in the live stream, I'm going to jump in and say hi to everybody. So, until tomorrow, have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you so much.